was just parenting the way I was parented. I thought it was the only way, like timeouts. Very controlled mindset. The parent is always in charge. The parent powers over the child. The child doesn't know anything. The parent knows everything. And boy, my eyes were opened. Because if it wasn't for my daughter, who really didn't want any of that control, like we butted heads. She challenged me. And I am so grateful for her doing that, because I would not have discovered this whole new respectful, positive discipline.
Hello, I'm Delaney Ruston, physician and the creator of the Screenagers movies, and this is the Screenagers podcast. I'm thinking back to many years ago. Actually, it was 2012, and I got the idea then to make the first Screenagers movie, which took a few years to make. And by the way, we've updated it. But one of the big motivations behind my desire to make the film was my complete confusion around how to work with my kids about how to have tech time limits. When they were on devices and I would become so triggered, whether it was because they were on it for so long or they were ignoring me because they were glued to a screen, I would just do this one thing. I would grab their device and stab them with my eyes. And I'm not proud of that. We called it my grab and stab. My grab and stab, not a good idea. It's one thing to have a goal around how much screen time our kids can be having and should have, and, what they should be doing on screens. And it's completely another thing to really make those limits happen. The fact is that tech time is a tool, it's a treat, all the entertainment, all the consuming of things, and it's talk, whether that's sometimes a treat and sometimes a tool. And the fact that these treats are combined with the tool and the talking makes it incredibly challenging. So that's what today's episode is all about. How do we more effectively work with our kids around creating limits? And it's about a wonderful parenting approach called positive discipline. At the start of the show, you heard from a mom who is a convert to positive discipline, and she has 3 kids. Today, I interview author and leading expert on positive discipline, Casey O'Rourke. Positive discipline was originally developed focused on littler kids, and it's Casey who has done a lot of fundamental work in applying this approach to the teenage years. Let's start. Just say a little bit about you, your name and what you do.
Yeah, so I am Casey O'Rourke, and I'm a positive discipline lead trainer. I've been sharing positive discipline since 2007. I practiced it with my own kids, felt pretty good about myself, hit the teen years, and was like, whoa, what does this look like with teenagers? Like, I went through this whole kind of existential crisis around, have I been duped? This is so hard. All the things that I thought were going to show up in the teen years over the course of the 4 years of high school showed up within 3 months. I realized, wow, the resources that I want don't exist. So I am going to create the resources. And that was 2017. I really shifted into just focusing on the adolescent years, moved through my own adolescent challenges with my kids as I was supporting parents. And yeah, haven't really looked back.
Let's start with some of the core elements of positive discipline.
There's a lot of phrases out there, catchphrases around parenting. There's positive parenting, gentle parenting, conscious parenting, all the things. And positive discipline, I like to say, is a capital P, capital D. It's a program. It's a book. It's an association. It was written by Jane Nelson, the book Positive Discipline. And now there's a whole library of books under the umbrella. And it's based in the work of Alfred Adler, who was one of the first individual psychologists. It is a departure from consequences and rewards. That's the behaviorist approach that most of us were raised with, and a lot of the world lives inside of, consequencing and rewarding our kids into walking the straight and narrow. So positive discipline really looks at the iceberg metaphor, where there's the behavior that we see at the tip of the iceberg, whether it's, we're going to get into screen overuse or misuse, or that defiance around sneaking things or back talk. There's a whole list of behavior that we don't love that lives at the tip of the iceberg. But rather than staying focused on those behaviors in positive discipline, what we do is we look under the surface of the iceberg and we get really curious around what is the problem that those behaviors are solving. And it's really, to me, a way of being with our kids in a way that is encouraging and empowering and really puts relationship as the thing that allows any kind of influence, especially in the teen years.
Let's turn to Sophia, the mom we heard at the top of the episode, as she talks about how she uses self-awareness tools when communicating with her daughter.
It's more like relationship driven, like approaching things with curiosity. So when you have that curious mindset, it takes you out of the reactive mode, which I was before. That's what inspired me.
Let's get right away into examples. So if, let's say, a kid is found sneaking her computer to play more video games than she is supposed to. So you find her on the video game, even though the time is up. When you're thinking about this iceberg metaphor, immediately what came to mind is I'm thinking of she wants significance in that she likes leveling up in the game, or she likes connection because maybe she's playing with her friends. Is that what you mean by trying to understand?
Yeah, and that's a big one. When our kids are sneaking their screens, first of all, like doing our own work around not taking it personally, which sounds like, gosh darn it, they are so disrespectful that they're not following the rules, and how dare they, or whatever your listeners' inner conversation is. Moving that aside, and instead getting really curious. And you're going to hear me talk about curiosity through this whole conversation. Oh, wow. I see that you're on your game. And I also see that time's up. Tell me about getting on your computer. You know, how are you feeling about the limits? I want to know what makes it hard when you get those little hits of, I really want to play my game right now. What makes it hard to be with that and not going sideways and trying to get it and sneaking it? I want more information than just, why can't you follow the rules? And that's when we get to find out, like, gosh, all of my friends are playing this game from 8 to 9 and my screen turns off at 7:30 and I really feel like I'm missing out. Okay, that's good information to have.
So that iceberg that you talked about, then the behavior is they snuck on to play the video game when they're not supposed to. Underneath that, in that curious mindset, is what is happening for them. So that's a big part of positive discipline, is trying to understand what's behind the behavior.
Yep.
Now, let's say we understand that the teen says their friend is 8 to 9. And so you as a family say, let's collaboratively talk about what if 3 nights a week you can be with the game with your friends 8 to 9 if you've gotten all your stuff done.
Sure.
And then after that, though, you find out that she is still, you said time's up. And 45 minutes later, you realize she has brought the device in her room and she's still playing. What you would maybe do then in that moment in a positive discipline framework.
It still is this conversation. And what's happening under the surface is I'm sending a message to my daughter. I care about you and I care about your experience. And I am open to hearing about your experience while also holding the structure of there's going to be limits and we can work together to figure this out. And I can be really explicit around it is not okay to me that you continue to sneak this. There is no surefire, here's the solution, and this will no longer be a problem for you.
Oh, gosh, don't worry.
Are a freaking nightmare, okay?
Absolutely. Exactly. No, absolutely. We're not saying, and then if you have that nice conversation, once they've taken it into their room.
Right.
But you're saying in that moment that they're in that room right then, you're triggered at this point. Would you have that conversation then? Or sometimes you're just like, not a conversation. I'm taking this out of the room.
Totally.
We're going to talk tomorrow or something.
100%. 100%. If I am triggered, and even if I'm not triggered, are you going to put the computer away or am I? Because it's past time. The positive discipline gets a bad rap around being permissive or too chatty, but it's kindness and firmness. It's connection and firmness. We as a society have a hard time with firmness because firmness looks like hands on the hips, fighter stance, furrowed brow, angry. But that's anger. Firmness is, I love Brené Brown talks about having a strong back, soft front. Like I can say, I see that this is really hard for you. And tonight you wanted more time on your computer and we have a limit. So are you going to put your computer away or am I? And maybe there's a time in the week where we talk about the screens and we make tweaks to the agreement if it feels appropriate. It could sound like we sit down on Sunday mornings and we talk about screen time, but you are welcome to bring this to that conversation. But right now you need to go to bed. So what's it going to be?
We have Tech Talk Tuesdays. So for our family and a lot of the people on the blog, it doesn't have to be a Tuesday, but all about something positive about tech and then some issues, whether that's in the family. This would be a great time to talk about that.
Yeah.
Or some issue. Is there ever a time where it's, you know what, Friday was going to be your next time to get to play 8 to 9. No longer you're going to get that. So let's get to then the consequent piece of that.
Positive discipline teaches important social and life skills. We're so conditioned for consequences. And the assumption that we're making with consequences is that in that moment, when our kid is, do I, don't I, go grab the computer and sneak some extra time. In that moment, is our kiddo going to think, if I get caught, they're going to take it away? Probably not. Their brains are wired to like risk assessment is, I probably won't get caught. I'm just going to go for it. Versus, oh, I'm noticing that I'm feeling left out. What can I do with this? What is the life skill that we want them to develop? So going back to your question, if this is an ongoing issue where your kiddo is just totally disregarding the limits and can't be bothered, then yeah, it makes perfect sense to rein in the tech use. But I think it gets a little slippery when it's you make a mistake, you get a consequence, because there's just more going on that we miss when we just assume that's going to be enough for them to do better.
You know what? They're not sticking to their limits. It's its own problem.
Right.
But related to that idea of taking things away, what are your thoughts about that?
I just think it's a power struggle and nobody wins. And when we power struggle that way, we're continuously upping the ante. Like, how far are you willing to go? We know how to make it hurt, right? There are a variety of mischiefs that happen and we're like, give me your phone. That's our go-to thing because we know.
Yeah, and I'm a big proponent of not doing that.
Yeah,
so we can talk about that. Yes.
Me too, because consequences or actually solutions should be related, reasonable, respectful, and helpful. Should be related. So if it doesn't have to do with tech, don't use tech as the consequence.
Let me just add too, one of the big problems with it is they're going to be scared to tell us anything about tech. And so I talk about with my audience a pledge as a parent to our young people that when you come to us with issues related to screen time, we are here to try to help you with it. And only if it's very problematic would maybe some tech time related consequence happen, but it's much more about us working together as opposed to our immediately confiscating the phone.
Yeah. And on that note, if you're not willing to do your work around how you respond to the mistakes they make with tech, they're going to think you're full of it. There are really scary decisions by the kids that didn't feel like they could go to their parents. That's a soapbox currently for me to talk to parents about. It can be life or death for your child to trust that they can bring their big mistakes to you and to feel supported and not worse. So if it's, okay, this entire week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we've made this agreement that you can be on the screen with your friends, and every single night you have struggled with that. So we're going to take a break. We're going to take a break from the screens. But what's more important to me is what is making it hard? right? What is making it hard? What I want to help my kid with is to develop the skills to be in the tension of what's hard and to be able more often than not to lean towards whatever agreement that they've made around their health and their tech use. That's more important to me than them following the rules. The rules just create the environment for them to bump up against that tension.
Let's say a 10-year-old has a total meltdown when the time is up. I imagine for sure you work with parents about that. What kind of skills do you help them to do?
That's a self-regulation problem, which is like the problem a lot of the time. Self-regulation. The conversation is, tell me what it feels like when that timer goes off. What are you noticing in your body? How are you feeling? What makes it hard? It is that curiosity. So when they're freaking out about coming off the computer, we get to be like, ooh, here's an opportunity for me to guide my kiddo around learning self-regulation. Like it's an opportunity.
Okay, so they're freaking out. You're saying, let's take a break, whatever, that time is up. You wouldn't have that conversation then.
No, absolutely not.
But you don't want to wait days and days. So maybe at dinner, gosh, that was hard. I do strength-based. You could have even gotten madder. Yeah. But you held that together. And you're here at dinner, you're resilient. That was really hard. Can you tell me about it? I would imagine listeners are thinking, how many 10-year-olds are going to be saying, in my body, I felt this, or I was feeling just so mad.
Well, they're not going to say it if nobody asks.
Exactly. Yep.
They're not going to say it if nobody asks. And you can say, they might be like, I don't know. And your response gets to be, okay, the next time the timer goes off and you're on your game, I want you to notice. Okay? Because we have a problem in society where people are not connected to their internal experience and they're spouting off. Here is the training ground. And it's not like I'm not Pollyanna. I know kids are like, what are you even talking about right now? And you get to be like, I know, isn't that a weird question? But I want you to notice that. At our house, we compare screen times. And when it's really high, my son will be like, oh, I'm like, oh, wow. How does that feel? It feels gross. Yay. I want my kid to look at their screen time and feel gross about it because then there's something in there. And so then where are you spending all your time? TikTok. I'm going to get rid of TikTok for a while. Great.
Let's turn to Sophia as she talks about how she uses self-awareness tools when communicating with her daughter. Your teen daughter, what's an example that you can think of related to screen time?
She is turning 13 in June. With her, we have worked a lot of self-awareness skills. So she is a lot more sensitive than my eldest. She gets affected by emotions around her, by words you say. So we found that out since she was 9. Like she would really grab on, like the friendship troubles, friendship drama. She would really grab onto it. So all of my kids, I try to build up more like self-awareness. How does it feel in your body when this happens?
So let's say you have a 14-year-old, 15-year-old son or daughter who's just very close and asking, how does that feel? And you really get blank stares. Do you coach your parents in offering? I wonder if you're feeling like it's unfair or just anger that's so intense.
I think that it could sound like I notice when I'm doing something and this shows up, here's how I feel. And it's like really activated in my body. But really, these questions around how does it feel in your body? The questions that I ask are not to lead them somewhere. They're really to cement in some of their own self-inquiry. I want them, especially as I think about my 18-year-old who's going to go off to college and have all sorts of opportunities to do all sorts of things. I want him to have a developed as it can be at 18, inner guidance system where he is thinking like, is this a good idea? Or man, I have a class tomorrow and I'm really into this game and time is flying by. And we get to start that at 10. We get to start that at 10 and we get to hold their anger about getting off the screen, not as a character flaw, but simply as a lack of skills around being in the tension of, I want to play this game and I have to get off the computer. And I think that's the mindset shift that's really powerful for parents. I will also say, if you have a teenager who's really closed off and doesn't want to talk to you, you have a different problem. Then I get curious around what makes it hard to talk to me. I want to know what I can do different so that there is room for us to have these conversations. And lots of times kids will report back like, you're super judgmental and critical. And we get to receive that.
Is there, Casey, in all of these years you've worked with families, then a common mistake parents make with tweens or teens? These are all emotionally triggering situations.
Parents get really worried that if they are firm, they are somehow putting a riff in the relationship. And what can happen is they tend to lean into being permissive and just avoiding the hard stuff because it's so deeply painful.
At us. In fact, in
Exactly.
Screenagers' next chapter, I mention how I'm trying to hold the limits and deal with my feelings when I feel guilt or all these different feelings, because we're human and we're going to feel all of that. It is super hard to feel like my kid is mad at me, or am I being too strict, not strict enough? Oh, it's really the internal struggle of the parent is not given enough voice of how hard that is.
Yeah, it's really hard. And there's voices out there who are like, you're the parent, do the thing. And I'm like, okay, great, thanks. And it's just not that simple. So some of the work that I do with parents is helping them with their internal dialogue. Because we hold boundaries doesn't mean we're breaking up. Our kids being mad at us is not the same as our kids never wanting to be in relationship with us. Our kids want to be in relationship with us, especially when we treat them with respect and there's collaboration and we see who they are versus holding this idea of who we want them to be. When all of that is in place, our kids can navigate being pissed at us for a while and come back around. And so we have to do our part. One, they need boundaries. Absolutely.
Yes.
Especially when we're talking about screens. These devices are designed to keep all of us busy, right? I would be embarrassed to show you my screen time app. So it's not just our kids. And then the other piece is like, what does our one-on-one time look like with our kids? Are we spending one-on-one time and not talking about what's hard, what's challenging, but getting to know the young person that they are growing into?
And I want to spotlight something you just said. Getting to know who our kids are versus what we expect that they should be. And that's that element of curiosity that you said.
Yeah.
And yet we carry into the home and the relationship all of these desires that our kids be a certain way. And we're not even conscious of that, but we get triggered by it when we hear of other families that their kids seem to be doing this and that. So that just feeds into, or just our imaginations as our kids were younger, what we expected to be. We bring all of that. And your point is getting curious, helping your kids to get curious about who they actually are, as opposed to what we want them to be and what we want them to be doing.
Being curious to understand who our children are and being intentional about growing our relationship with them can really help keep lines of communication open. Listen again to the mom, Sophia, as she explains a situation she encountered with her daughter around phone use.
She doesn't have a phone right now. When she wanted her own phone, we talked about it. And I said, how will that affect you when you have that connection always in your hand? How do you get away from it? And she is aware that it would be hard to get away. Like, she knows that comments that she may read may affect her, because she remembers how her body feels when a friend made a comment that she didn't like. It really stuck with her for a couple of years, and it's not a good feeling.
By asking questions, Sophia was able to help her daughter see beyond the immediate desire to have a phone and understand the reasons her mother was hesitant about introducing this technology into her life at such a young age. What tools are available in positive discipline to help define safeguards and limits around tech use? Here's Casey.
We have a tool called making agreements in positive discipline. And really, it looks like collaborative problem solving. So you bring up to your 16, 17-year-old, hey, here's what I'm noticing about your tech use. And I'm wondering, of course, this is where I go, how are you feeling about it? So it's this ongoing conversation, coming back to agreements. So I'm noticing that a lot of times parents will say, oh my gosh, their grades are slipping, but they're on their phones all the time. So in a agreement conversation, it's going to sound like, hey, I noticed what's going on with your grades. How are you feeling about that? What's studying look like for you? Like, I want to know from their perspective, what's happening for them. What do they want? Is it important to them to get a certain GPA? Is it important to them to graduate with their class? Is it important to them to be ready to go on to something different? And then, so what do you need? So hearing from them and then circling back, I notice you're spending a lot of time on your phone. It seems as though there's a lot of time that could be spent studying and you're on your phone. How do you feel about that? And usually they're like, no, it's not true, which is fine. So let's come up with a plan, right, to help you get what you want with school. What could that look like? And so you get to brainstorm together different ideas, wanting them to be related, respectful, reasonable, and helpful. You go through the ideas, cross off anything that doesn't match that criteria, including I'm not going to do anything about my phone. So that might be a suggestion. I might suggest something ridiculous, like your phone is put away from 4 to 8 every day so that they have something to cross off. And then of the solutions that are left, what do you want to try this week? What would be, let's find something that's helpful. So it really is about this collaborative spirit. And in the collaborative spirit, we also get to have faith that our kids do have goals and dreams, that they do want support.
Yes.
We have to have faith in that. It kills me when I see in different places like, oh, they're just lazy or, oh, they just don't care. I don't think that's true.
Yeah.
I think they're hurting. I think they're anxious. I think they're dealing with these things that are designed to keep them busy and they don't have the skills for it.
Yes. And I often give this metaphor to parents that I'm working with is to think about a child on a mountain at age 5 and is looking down on people. That child looks down. They want to be successful. They want to have all the goodness in there. And then it gets messy. They look like they're not caring and whatnot, but actually fundamentally, they want that. They might go through mental health problems and it's going to really get derailed.
Yeah.
But that idea really relates then to what you just said. In that tool, then can you just distill it a tiny bit more? Are you both writing on pieces of paper kind of extreme things as a way to like then cross them off? Can you explain the tool?
Yeah. So the brainstorm, I think I just have the parents keep track of the brainstorm. If there is one, I don't need to put my phone away ever, then that's when I would say, okay, you could just have a screen free time from 4 to 8 or whatever. And they'll say, what? Say, nope, don't forget. You're going to get to pick the solution for the week that is useful to you.
We're just brainstorming.
We're just brainstorming.
And you can sometimes as a parent go to an extreme that you think they maybe won't take.
Yeah.
But you're trying to get to one.
And when they get to that place, when they make the decision, okay, I'll do this thing. And maybe I'll put my phone away from 6 to 7 and do homework. Great. What's going to help you do that? That's my follow-up question, right? So where are you going to put it? How are you going to remember? I want to know, I want to build in the support that they need to follow through with what they say they're going to do. Because that's where things break down. We don't have a deadline. We don't have the support. We forget. Parents forget what we've agreed to. Do you want a reminder? No, I don't want a reminder. Okay. Listen to them and zip your lips and give it a week. And maybe the week goes by and they do not follow through. And then you get to say, okay, great. So this was the solution you picked. How did that work out for you? Here's what I noticed. What do you want to do for this week? Let's play with it. So the firmness is this conversation isn't going anywhere. We're going to keep having this conversation and support you in building skills around doing what you need to do without being sucked into your device. The kindness, right? Kind and firm. The kindness is connecting with them about their experience and not being angry or judgmental or critical. Okay, so this was a solution that wasn't actually helpful. Is there something else on the list that you want to try this week? And then if it's obvious, maybe it's not obvious. So I'm hearing parents like, yeah, but what if nothing ever works? Then you're having a different conversation. You're having a different conversation. So I notice when we make these agreements each week, you're not following through. And I'm really curious about that. What is it about this that makes it hard for you?
And I think at some point, particularly if you have a younger child, it would be you're having a hard time picking one and picking the ways you're going to follow through. We need to be more proactive because we know you actually need a break.
I realize that it is not responsible for me to give you this much freedom on your device. And so we're going to pull it back. Absolutely. 100%.
When you said relationships are key, what is your one-to-one? You're saying if you guys are trying to have a good time together, can you have that? Can you have conversations? You're trying to help families see, is there a foundation of some goodness happening in that relationship? And if not, then that could be counseling is needed, a mental health challenge that we're not even aware of.
Or it could just be as simple as you're all really busy and you haven't taken the time to make sure that the message of love is getting through and that particular kid is being seen and feeling seen. It's not always like a big call the therapist or the parent coach. It can also just be like what shows up for me in my relationship with my kids is when things start to feel kind of angsty, I step back and I think about my own behavior. And more often than not, I realize, you know what? I've leaned a little bit more controlling, a little bit more demanding lately. And I think that they have felt it. And then I bring that to them. Hey, I noticed we've been tense lately. And I just want to own that I've recognized like my behavior has been controlling, demanding. And 9 times out of 10, whichever kid I'm talking to is, yeah, you have been that way. And it's been really annoying. And then great. I'm aware, I'm pulling back, and that helps us move forward. So there's a lot of space for vulnerability here too.
So now my mindset shifted into more of intention, like influence. How do I approach my child where it's more connecting? So when I approach things with curiosity, when they want to do more stuff in their electronics, what need is it that they're fulfilling? I know that, for example, teenagers, a lot of it are based on social relationships.
Our relationship is where we have influence. And so a kid that's stomping around and leaving their stuff everywhere, 1, lack of awareness and skills, and 2, just an indicator that they're not feeling a sense of belonging and mattering and meaning. That's the entry point, I think. That's a great entry point around, how is this kid feeling in our family space?
And they might not answer. That's what you're going to hear a lot. But you do it in that's where the skill of parenting is. You go for a walk. Let's just go get an ice cream today. And you're walking and things are better. And you just touch gently on, gosh, I've been reading this thing about this. You just try different ways. And that's key. Because the direct way sometimes doesn't work, sometimes will. But what you said earlier on, which is just wonderful, it's planting those seeds, getting them to start thinking about it. And sometimes we are surprised and they do right away open up. And if we don't ask, like you said, who's asking them these things?
Yeah.
Thank you. This has been so fun to have you on. Very lively discussion.
I love being in conversation with you. And I love all the work that you're doing always.
Thanks for listening today. And if you can tell one friend about the Screenagers podcast, that really helps spread the word and helps people find the show. Or rate it. That's great too. Be sure to go to screenagersmovie.com to learn more, to find the show notes from this episode, learn about screening our movies, and sign up for my weekly blog about parenting in the screen age, now in its 8th year. And you can use the search bar to find all sorts of topics that I've covered in that blog. This Screenagers podcast episode was produced by me, your host, Delaney Ruston, Lisa Tabb, Rebecca Tolan, and Alan Gofinski. Alan is also our sound editor.